So it's related topic to the dissociation of consciousness and attention, and here it is. So can we check the contents of consciousness without requiring reports from patients, participants? And this is an introduction to the no-report paradigms. So consciousness, attention, and the reports and language are all interrelated, and it has been discussed in the past. So, for example, Humboldt, who is an influential linguist and the philosopher of the philosophy of language, and he has been saying the following. And for the part that I put kind of an empty box, I want you to try to come up with your answer, X and Y here. So what he said was that just as no concept is possible without something, so also there can be no objects for the mind, since it is only through the concept, of course, that anything external acquires a full being for something. But the whole mode of perceiving things subjectively necessarily passes over into cultivation and the use of something. So what do you guys think about what this very influential thinking of Humboldt said about language and consciousness? Can you type in some answer into the chat box? Is it a bit unclear? Or, I mean, if you, it's a bit hard to interpret. Okay, yeah, X is yeah, language. That's right. So just as no concept is possible without language, so also there can be no object for the mind. And since it is only through the concept, of course, that anything external acquires full being for here. What do you think would be here? Maybe as a hint, maybe I should just say that the ones that are in the X or Y should be one of these concepts to give you a hint. And this has been a quite dominant kind of thinking for a long time. And this one, X is language. So then, if that's the case, what do you think is this? Why? It's three alternative. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Awareness, consciousness. That's right, basically. So full being for consciousness or awareness and consciousness, I mean, is the same thing in this context. So it means that basically without language, you can't really elaborate your concept, and without elaborating your concept, you can't become fully conscious of something. So even if you think that you saw things or objects or thought about something, if you don't have an language or concept to categorize things, or it's very hard to probably memorize. And without memorizing it, you also can't be sure whether you actually experienced it or not. And that's the sort of the thinking of this, around the time of the Humboldt's on language. So that's good. So maybe I should, from next year, I should be explicit about this one should be one of these X and Y. All right. And then this one, the next sort of quote is by kind of Descartes, Enlightenment philosophers after around this time. both empiricists and the rationalists assume that consciousness as primary compared to language, but Descartes considered animals as sophisticated something. And this is probably difficult to imagine without really good background. But can anyone guess what Descartes and the other highly influential philosopher thought about animals who do not have a language at that time? So without language, animals are either possibly, conscious, but no language, unconscious. Yeah, that's one possibility. And by that, in fact, Descartes actually considered that as a sort of sophisticated machine. And by machine, what he meant was unclear from this, context, but it's probably no language, no conscious kind of idea. You're right. So this has been quite, influential thinking. Language, concepts, consciousness go together. That has been a long time tradition. And then, because of the influence of the behaviorism that I reviewed a little bit in the initial part of this lecture series, where those experimenters or scientists should be focusing on only something that is observable, and then the language is something that you can observe by looking at the outputs, but a thinking process behind language production is not possible to see, right? And also animals, they can't generate a language, so they are assumed to be potentially unconscious, but at least by Descartes it's now sophisticated machines. And so this behaviorism strongly prohibited talk or discussions about research on the things that you cannot directly observe. That's the sort of point. And then around that time, linguists started to become more, behavioristic, and so they looked at only the, how the words are combined to make it into meaning or sentence, or how this culture influences word recognition and things like that. So that's a sort of the one type of the linguistic kind of study took on afterwards. But then at the same time, they still continue to talk about cognition and also mind within this tradition. But what did they mean really is actually meaning of the words or conscious experience related to the language production and things like that. So it's this type of the euphemism, or not directly talking about conscious aspect, but actually dealing with that is quite as widespread across many fields. So when you look at these fields, they are actually talking about conscious aspects of the language and so on, but it's not probably clear at the first sight. And then so many of the linguists, as well as consciousness researchers, think about there are some kind of relationship between consciousness and the language, but some of them go really far and then go to the sort of extreme kind of view. So, for example, this is the view held by Cohen and Dennett in their paper, relatively recent, and it's also preceded by Dan Dennett, who is a very influential philosopher who wrote a book titled Consciousness Explained, even. So here is what they say. So it is a product of cognitive functions, such as a verbal report, a button pressing, that allow X to be empirically studied at all. So here, again, what do you think will fix, figure in this X? Basically, he says the same kind of thing in the same within the same paper. Functions such as language and decision-making operate on the distributed experiences and lead to subjective reports. So what do you guys think X in here? Yeah, that's right. So it's a consciousness. So according to this view, it's only through the functions, cognitive functions, especially vowel reports or button pressing, something that tries to report what you are experiencing. Only with that, we can empirically study consciousness. That's their view. And it is probably very kind of dominant kind of view, especially if you are influenced by cognitive behavioristic kind of viewpoint. Yeah. Yeah, so that's good point. So yeah, the philosopher called John Searle made a very convincing argument through the Chinese room argument that this is a thought experiment. And then what he says is that you can have a language without being conscious. So the Searle's Chinese room argument goes like this. You can have a kind of room that confines some person who doesn't understand Chinese at all, right? However, when the input of some kind of Chinese person talking to this room, he receives some kind of lookup table or instructions how to answer it, which is written in English dictionary. And he looks at this instruction and then gives an output according to this instruction, and then put it into the sort of the response box. And then from the outside point of view, it looks like this Chinese room is understanding Chinese and then responding appropriately. However, the person inside the box, the Chinese room, is not really understanding this language, and also is not conscious of any aspects of this query and also answer. So that's a good point in pointing out that dissociation between language and consciousness. Something similar has been also talked about between the dissociation of intelligence and consciousness. It's called the blockhead argument, and it's very similar to this Chinese room argument. But you can think about sort of a gigantic kind of machine that has all the instruction about how to play chess. And then under certain condition, this lookup table gives you specific kind of instruction on how to move the chess things. And then it appears that they are playing chess really intelligently. But it's just following this lookup table, and it's not understanding it, or it's playing it in an intelligent way. So from this type of argument, both Chinese room argument or a blockhead argument, these type of argument, putting too much emphasis on the behavior or cognitive functions itself to equate or study consciousness has been questioned. So that's a good point. Then what we can do, that's a question. So on the other hand, so that's one issue, right? But many people have also not agreed with this kind of tradition that thoughts, consciousness, concepts, language all are intermingled together, and the animals do not have any kind of a conscious experience or elaborated concepts. And these are the people such as Ernst Mach or William James or Kitaro Nishida in Japan, who talked about the pure experience. And here, the pure experience is something that you can imagine as a pure conscious experience before you try to make a judgment. So typically in English language, when you see a red apple, what you kind of, express it as an, I see a red apple, right? But this is quite already, involving lots of construct in this, sentence. Here, it assumes this, concept of I, and then also it is I who is seeing this red apple. But, in other language, for example, in Japanese, it's quite common to talk about things without any, subject, or we can also even remove the verb as well. So a red apple is totally fine kind of, construct of a sentence. And then if you only also, want to talk about or, reflect what you care about, that in this case could be it's just red. It could be. So the point here is that there has been kind of, tradition, including this Edmund Husserl and other phenomenologists, so-called, take this experience more seriously, and then to put aside this linguistic kind of, structure, such as an I see and a red apple, but it may be the more fundamental thing is just a redness, or this redness is confined within the red apple, and then finally, it is me who is seeing the red apple, kind of, order of the experience. So if you think, if you agree with this kind of idea, then you would probably doubt that it is not necessary for people to report or think about things in this, subject seeing the object kind of manner. Okay, so far is this a bit? It may be a bit philosophical, and so it might be difficult to understand. But is it fine so far? Okay, and then but empirically speaking, many of the studies conducted in since 1990s, and then also in early 2000s and so on, always involved this report of the percept, right? So for example, in the case of the bistable figure, such as Necker cube, like this type of the cube, whether you see this side as a front, or this side as a front, will fluctuate over the time. And then using this type of stimulus or binocular rivalry, you can see which, by fixing the stimulus, physical stimulus at the externally, you can track which areas of the brain correlates with the fluctuation with the percept. And then when you look at the time, it's just like five studies. When you look at the studies that showing this common activity together with perceptual change, it turns out that it is most often parietal area or prefrontal area, like here, that are most commonly correlated with the perceptual report. And this prediction is very consistent with the GNW, global neural workspace theory, because these are also the areas that are known to exert the effects of attention on the areas of the brain, like back of the brain. This is a visual area, or this is a higher area visual area. So if you try to select some aspect of the vision, and if you're impaired in these, front parietal areas, then you cannot do that. And also, these are the areas that are also proposed by the global neural workspace theory to act as a global workspace, flexible place where many things can come and go. So so far so good, and it's been quite dominant over the last few years. But then when we do not report on our experience, do we still see the same kind of pattern? That's the kind of the experiment people started to think about. So if if you are on the side of the PR experience, James Mark and Nishida or Futsal, then during the binocular rivalry, you do see things without any kind of attention or without any judgment. Just observe it, but still you change. Your experience changes. However, those people who argue that these cognitive functions, verbal report, button pressing, or language or conceptualization, these are the ones that makes conscious experience to be very concrete and also valid, long-lasting, and also memorizable. Says that it is a report that makes it possible. And so these people would say that you might feel like you are experiencing something over the time, but it's almost like a refrigerator. When you look at the refrigerator inside, then it's almost always bright inside it. And that if you close it, you of course you don't see it. But when you open it again, it's light again. And that means that, it may be the case that, if you don't ever try to report it, then it's all, very fuzzy and unclear. But, only when you try to report it, attend to it, this becomes very clear. And so if that's the case, then if you ask people not to report anything during the binocular rivalry, then binocular rivalry might stop. So that's a kind of question that people started to think. Okay, so with that, I'll stop here for 4 more minutes. Do you have any question? Or maybe you can ask question after the break.